everyone, and welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Guilty. I'm your host, James, aka Mr. History. And here we are with our first biography episode. You know, I sat and thought about who I should start with. Honestly, it didn't take more than a minute for somebody to come to mind. Even though this podcast covers world history and people from all throughout it, I just couldn't help but think of my favorite leader and perhaps one of the greatest presidents throughout American history. No, not just that, world history. Go ahead and take a guess. Okay, if you guessed Abraham Lincoln, you're on the money. Literally, he's on the U.S. $5 bill. President Abraham Lincoln was a very important man, especially during his time in office. He took care of the country throughout perhaps the most troubling events in its entire history. His legacy as a leader lives throughout history still today. But before we get into all his achievements as a politician, first, let's look at his backstory. Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, in a one-room log cabin on the rugged frontier of Hardin County, Kentucky. His parents, Thomas and Nancy Lincoln, were poor farmers with little education. Life was hard. When Abe was just 9, his mother died of milk sickness, a loss that deeply scarred him. In 1816, the Lincolns moved to Indiana, seeking better land and opportunity. Young Abraham spent much of his youth working on the farm, splitting logs and plowing fields. His formal education amounted to less than a year, but he devoured every book he could find, from the Bible to Shakespeare, often walking miles just to borrow one. At age 21, Lincoln moved with his family to Illinois, where he began forging his independence. He worked as a rail splitter, a store clerk, a flatboat navigator, and even tried his hand at running a general store in New Salem. His honesty and strength earned him the nickname Honest Abe. When the Black Hawk War broke out in 1832, Lincoln volunteered for the Illinois militia and was elected captain by his peers, a leadership moment that he would cherish, even though he never saw combat. In 1834, Lincoln was elected to the Illinois state legislature as a member of the Whig Party. Around this time, he began teaching law himself, reading Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England by candlelight. In 1836, he passed the bar and became a practicing lawyer. During this time, Lincoln met and eventually married Mary Todd, the well-educated daughter of a prominent Kentucky family. Together, they would have 4 sons. Lincoln built a reputation as a sharp, principled lawyer in Springfield, Illinois. Known for his plain speech, powerful logic, and moral clarity, he became one of the most respected attorneys in the state. Once he turned to politics, he served a single term in the U.S. House of Representatives, where he opposed the Mexican-American War and spoke out against the expansion of slavery, views that were unpopular at the time. After a brief retreat from politics, Lincoln was galvanized by the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed slavery to expand into new territories. In response, he re-entered the national debate with powerful speeches that made him a rising voice in the newly formed Republican Party. His most famous moment came in 1858, during the series of Lincoln-Douglas debates against Senator Stephen A. Douglas. Though Lincoln lost the Senate race, his elegance and powerful moral arguments against slavery made him a national figure. In 1860, the Republican Party saw Lincoln as a moderate, unifying figure, someone principled, yet pragmatic. At the Republican National Convention in Chicago, he won the nomination for president on the 3rd ballot, defeating better-known rivals like William Seward. On November 6, 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected the 16th President of the United States, the first from the Republican Party. His victory triggered a national crisis as southern states began seceding from the Union before he took office. But Lincoln, the self-taught boy from the frontier, was ready to meet the greatest challenge in American history: the American Civil War. Why did it start, you may ask? There are several reasons. Southern states relied on slavery for their economy, while northern states were increasingly anti-slavery. Southern states also believed they had the right to govern themselves, especially over the issue of slavery. Lincoln opposed the expansion of slavery. When he was elected, Southern states felt threatened and began seceding. These 11 states formed the Confederate States of America, led by President Jefferson Davis. Lincoln refused to recognize secession, viewing it as rebellion. What did Lincoln do? Well, here are some of his greatest achievements as president. He passed the 13th Amendment in early 1865. It abolished slavery nationwide. He kept border states from joining the Confederacy and strengthened the federal government. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This freed slaves in rebelling states, shifting the war's focus to ending slavery. He appointed top generals like Ulysses S. Grant and called for more troops to reorganize the Union Army to lead the war effort. Most famously, he gave the Gettysburg Address after the bloodiest battle of the war. It was a brief but iconic speech about liberty, equality, and national purpose. Here it is, but don't worry, it's not very long. fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here, dedicated to the great task remaining before us. Pretty epic, right? That was a truly incredible thing he said. In 1858, he also gave one as a senatorial candidate, one known as the House Divided speech. He said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure, permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other." These speeches are still looked upon today and still can be used to inspire others and promote freedom. After 4 years, the American Civil War ended on April 9, 1865, when General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. Although some smaller Confederate forces continued to surrender in the following weeks, this marked the effective end of the war. But sadly, President Lincoln was assassinated just 5 days later on April 14th, and he died the following morning. He was shot by John Wilkes Booth at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., while attending a play. From what I've read, no one was guarding his door, or someone was supposed to be. Whoever it may have been, that little mistake, that little error, changed the entire course of history. Honestly, this really isn't something to debate over. Abraham Lincoln was part of the good in humanity. He was a saint, someone to look up to, and someone who brought hope to others. A God-fearing, humble man and a leader who wished for the best of his fellow man with love and compassion. He preserved the United States and helped bring it back together into what it is today. I truly am glad he got to see this before his passing. It's on my bucket list, to visit the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. That's something I've always wanted to do and something I suggest you all do if you ever get the chance. If you want to learn more about Abraham Lincoln or the Civil War, you can read about him, his accomplishments, and his presidency many places online. I suggest you watch the movie Lincoln, starring Daniel Day-Lewis. It truly gives its viewers a very accurate portrayal. Very accurate. But don't go watching Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. That movie, I'm not sure that movie's very accurate at all, okay? just to let you know. Well, that's it for this episode. Just so you know, the next biography is going to be someone you've probably heard about. Listener discretion is advised. Here's a look.
Du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt deine Stimme ab, wenn ja...
This guy sounds nuts, doesn't he? Well, he was in my book. Not a fan. Find out more next time on The Good, the Bad, and the Guilty. Thank you all for tuning in. Do you have someone from history you'd like to suggest? Contact listener mail at themysterioushistorian@gmail.com. That's themysterioushistorian@gmail.com. Thank you again. See you guys next time.